A very warm welcome from Bangkok to all the delegates joining for this webinar. We're about to start in a few minutes. We wait for some more participants. Thank you again for joining this NTCC ADCN webinar. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Once again, very welcome to this webinar. We have another 1 minute. We'll wait for a few more delegates to participate. So warm welcome from the NTCC ADCN here in Bangkok, and we'll be back in 1 minute. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome from Bangkok again. Thank you for zooming in to this first of a new series, GREENTECH Masters. It's 3 minutes past 3 Bangkok time, and you know, as the Dutch, we like to start on time because we have a lot of knowledge sharing and inspiration for this afternoon planned. Again, very warm welcome to everyone, wherever you are. From the registration list, we see we have participants from throughout the ASEAN region, but also the Netherlands, of course, and other countries. So again, a warm welcome to all of you. So today we are very honored to have an exclusive interview. It is a new concept. And today we have managed to get time from Dr. Godfrey Dol. And he will be sharing his insights and what I understand from fellow industry leaders in his sector, which he has been working for almost 4 decades, that he is sort of considered as the godfather of the greenhouse technology. Wow, if that doesn't put some pressure on your shoulders, Godfrey, I wouldn't know. But that will come later. The interview will be conducted by my dear colleague and fellow board member of the Netherlands Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Manuel Madani. In his normal life, he's responsible as a business lead for the agri-tech company BayWa. I'm sure we all know this company. And he's responsible for not only Southeast Asia, but also for Japan and Korea. So Manuel will be conducting the interview. And before we will do that, I would like to also share a few slides and a few welcome words on behalf of the ASEAN Dutch Business Network, the chamber network of the 6 fellow Dutch chambers. And I'll just briefly show you some slides. You might recognize some of these logos maybe you are a member of one. If you're not, I can highly recommend you joining one of these chambers. And actually, what do we do and who do you need to contact? You will see in the next slide. And some of my colleagues are actually joining in today's call. Hill, can I have the next slide, please? Yes, these are the faces I was looking for. Nanya Burki, she's currently our rotating chair, and she's based in Indonesia and representing the Dutch business network over there. Guido, I'm sure he's still enjoying his TED holiday in Vietnam, the Dutch Business Association in Vietnam. Marco, I saw your face already. Thank you for joining. Marco, the Executive Director, my colleague from Malaysia, from the Malaysian Dutch Business Council. Then we have our colleague Noor from the ADB Dutch Chamber in Singapore. And last but certainly not least, I saw you're also joining our call today, Mitchell, my colleague from the Dutch Chamber and Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, so Mitchell Smollers. So in case you would like to reach out to any one of us, you can reach us via our new website. On the next slide, just a brief bullet points of what we are, what the ADCN stands for. Well, we came up with words like inspiring, informing, and connecting. And I guess today's webinar is a good example. We conduct similar webinars and hopefully soon live events as well, where members are most welcome to join. And this is all for you as Dutch entrepreneurs, fellow entrepreneurs within the region, to help you in market expansion. We see that the gateway to ASEAN should be through an ADCN. We also would like to be the first point of contact in case you want to do business or expand. And of course, we welcome you to similar events like this and webinars. More information can be found. We're very proud. We had a launching event a month ago on our new website. So please do visit our ADCN.asia. ADCN.asia. That's very straightforward. You can then also sign up for the newsletter, and you'll be regularly getting information about all upcoming information and websites, etc., and webinars. So please do sign up for the newsletter, and thank you for that. And then the last slide, last but not least, this is why we are here. We have Dr. Godfrey Dol and Manu Adani, who will be conducting the interview. Again, a new series of the NTCC under the umbrella of the ADCN, under the GREENTECH Masters. So please stay tuned for upcoming events in the upcoming weeks. But it's time, Manuel, for you to take over the microphone. And we all wish all participants a very interactive webinar. And please do share any questions you have via the chat box, because this is also your webinar. Please ask questions. And I'm sure Manuel and Godfrey would like to zoom into that. So again, thank you very much and wish you a great webinar.
Everyone, a very good afternoon and a good morning for people on the other side of the world. On behalf of ADCN, industry experts, speakers, friends that I saw in the registration lists, and many industry colleagues, on behalf of the Dutch community, Dutch business community in Southeast Asia, we welcome you to this very nice webinar that we have been looking forward to, because this is one of the first webinars of its kind, GREENTECH Masters, where we try to bridge that international expertise, knowledge to a very emerging market here in Southeast Asia. My name is Manuel Madani. I've been in Southeast Asia for over 12 years, and I've seen a lot of change happen. Let me quickly set up the slide here. So Southeast Asia is one of the fastest growing regions in the world, and you could not have missed is that many investors and many companies are eyeing for entry in Southeast Asia. But at what level and what should they do prior to get in? And that's why it's so important that we have international experts from across the world to share what they have learned in so many different regions in the world. And we could basically cherry pick and create an own workable concept for a tropical region here in Southeast Asia. So I've been in the industry for around since over 12 years. I've founded many trade shows, as you might know, like Horti Asia, Horti China, and Horti Future in Vietnam. And throughout the years, you saw a lot of shift in the market. We saw the new greenhouse coming in 2010, and today we're eyeing a totally different challenge than 10 to 12 years ago. And it's really important that what we learn today, we should adopt, or at least see what we could do to become more competitive in the region and learn from international experts. So the industry is eyeing or aiming for a big transformation. It's not only in Southeast Asia, but elsewhere in the world too. And it's going to be a future where food and horticulture goes together to be produced near cities and in much more sustainable way than we are doing now. So, but how are we going to create this new platform. And if we were to set up a new technology cells or concepts, how are we going to manage it? Or today, how do we simply start by leading by example? And more importantly, how does the future landscape look like? We have smallholders, low-tech growers, mid-tech growers, and now we will learn the extension of a very high-tech growing facility that could also adapt to tropical climates. So there's a lot of big questions that we need to ask ourselves today. But is it really about a cultural change that influences our behavior in our vision, in our doing, and in our believing that we could create this sustainable future? And coming back to everything that we are facing as industry right now, it's this book that really inspired me in the last months by going into the market, that there is a solution to have a very effective way of growing a profitable crop. And this book contains not only the knowledge, but experiences for nearly 40 years. So it's a scalable tool and has all the insights that we are going to learn about it today. So it's a perfect fit towards what we want to do as a Dutch community in Southeast Asia. As GreenTech Masters is purely focused on the global leadership that's coming into the region and see what we could learn to inspire other entrepreneurs to grow a crop, a high yield crop, or maybe a crop in a very sustainable way. If we look back over the last decade, since 2010, we see a lot of changes. In my previous shows that we have founded early in 2010, we saw the first plastic greenhouses being brought up to scale. Controlled irrigation was obviously the next step to give the plant what it needs, when it needs, and whenever it grows in its crop cycle. 2 years later, the first climate control systems were introduced, but practically at a very basic level, so shading and ventilation. Then a few years later, a few role model facilities were built in Chiang Mai, in the north of Malaysia, in parts of Indonesia, and in Vietnam. Then a few years later, we had other problems. We were facing on lowlands energy problems because we were too busy with cooling the facility on 5 or 6 degree basis. There were humidity issues. And later it became more and more of a topic. How do we make greenhouses more sustainable? And today's speaker will not affect where we go, but also where we are, what we are challenging right now. So whatever we do, we are crossing the chasm that comes out in the future. Today's speaker has been awarded and is an author and has four decades of experience. But who he really is, find out here.
4 decades. Even though I was born, raised and educated in the Netherlands, I've never grown a crop there. Instead, I was a pioneer in the glasshouse industry in many countries, mostly in tomatoes. I have managed very large glasshouses and built more than 20 projects in 9 different countries and climates. In the process, I've learned how to tackle difficult climates, from +50 Celsius in Dubai to -50 in Kazakhstan, from the very dry in Saudi Arabia to the very humid in Japan. Last year, I was a consultant for the winning team of the artificial intelligence competition organized by the University of Wageningen. It was my very first crop in the Netherlands. Yeah, nice job. Thanks, Missy. In 2013, I was awarded the honor of Farmer of the Year in Australia for my work with the Costa Group. In 2015, I managed my first semi-closed glasshouse, built by Van der Hoeven. I saw the semi-closed glasshouse as a solution to deal with hot climates. I also saw that growers were struggling how to work with this new technology, so I started writing blogs about how to grow in a semi-closed glasshouse. These blogs have culminated into a book which has been published by Van der Hoeven and is now available to buy. In the book, I share my experiences, not just about the semi-closed glasshouse, but also about growing in general. It gives young growers numerical targets to aim for. There is information on temperature, humidity and CO2 management, a whole chapter on irrigation and labor management, and why the location is so important if you want to build a glasshouse. There is even a chapter on the future of glasshouses versus vertical farming. If you like to buy it, the book is available for sale for €27.50 through my website www.glasshouse-consultancy.com, and there is a link in the text associated with this blog. Click the link and it will take you to the page where you can pay by credit card. If you like more information, please email me on godfrey@glass.
So we have a very special speaker here today, and I would like to welcome Godfrey Dol, who was born and raised, but also educated in the Netherlands. And with a degree in chemistry, his first job was not in greenhouses, but for setting up a lab in soil and tissue testing. And a few years later, he became a grower. And later, 4 decades later, he has almost 40 years of experience in 9 different countries, working in very high-tech glasshouses. He's been awarded in Australia by the Costa Group as the Farmer of the Year. And he's also been recognized by the Wageningen University for its artificial intelligence contest. Godfrey, welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Manel. I'm very pleased to be here.
I've been looking forward to this meeting or to this interview because we have heard a lot of things about you, Godfrey. You have quite an extensive experience in many countries, as you saw in the video. And we would love to pick your brain for a very emerging region in Southeast Asia. We have our challenges, and hopefully you can take us further with new technology or new experiences for us that we can adapt to. One key question to start off with: where do you see the industry by 2030?
It's predicting the future is a very tricky thing. I remember John F. Kennedy 3 months before he made his famous "Go to the Moon" speech. He actually stated in a newspaper article that we would never be able to get to the moon, and 3 months later, he made that speech, and a couple of years later they did go to the moon. So it is a very tricky thing to do, but I was in the United States in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and that was really the starting point for a huge conversion from field-grown tomatoes to glasshouse-grown. And when I moved to Australia in the late 90s, the same thing happened. And what I saw happening was that while there was a lot of in-between technologies, eventually the industry separated into low tech, where it was just field grown and very low cost, and into the high tech. And the reason for that is that particularly the supermarkets love the quality and the consistency of quality and supply into the supermarkets, whereas the field grown fruit, it was very difficult to guarantee a supply. If the weather was adverse, then the supply of tomatoes would suddenly dry up, and the price would go through the roof, and people would stop buying tomatoes. And so they much love the supermarkets much love the consistency that it would supply. Plus, there is the ability to supply year round out of greenhouses. So I see that trend continuing into 2030. But what is changing is that the technology that is available today is different even to what it was 5 years ago. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, glasshouse builders would build glasshouses anywhere around the world, and they would just use the Dutch model, the Venlo type glasshouse. And there was more or less a belief that if you built those glasshouses anywhere, you could grow crops in there successfully. But that proved to be not true. And maybe if I can share a picture. which really, sorry. Okay, sorry.
No worries, Godfrey, I have 12 more very interesting questions to go.
Yeah, no, it's, but let me, sorry, I can't find a picture right now, but the climate in the Netherlands is a very special climate that is very few places to be seen in other parts of the world. And so different climates call for different answers in technology. And so, you know, where do I see the industry in 2030? That there will be more technology involved in glass houses to mitigate the climate risk that difficult climates pose onto a glasshouse production facility.
And if you look into the future by 2030, do you see in particular more plastic greenhouses, or is it really glass houses? And where is the balance between indoor growing, vertical farming, and greenhouses?
Yes, so there is certainly a hype about vertical farming, but let me answer your first question first. High-tech glasses, light is a very important factor in glasshouse, and particularly in areas with low light. 1% extra light means 1% extra production, and so light is important, and typically glass has a higher light transmittance than plastic. There are some new plastics out there that have a higher transmittance, and there are also plastics that now have claims of being able to last 10 to 20 years, because typically plastics deteriorate under the sunlight and need to be replaced after 4 or 5 years. So that's a huge burden on the environment that glass doesn't pose. But there are some new plastics out there. So if I say the future is into higher light transmittance, that could be interpreted as glass, but could also be some of the new plastics that are coming out and being introduced into the industry. In terms of vertical farming, from my perspective, there's a bit of a misconception about food miles, and the hype ride that vertical farms are riding on is that farms need to be built into cities so that they can provide the cities, the people that live in the cities, with food. But typically, these are very small scale operations, do not have the scale of economies. If you imagine, if you have a rooftop glass house on the 40th floor of a building, and you need to pump water 40 stories into the air, that represents an increased electricity cost, and then all the produce that you get has to go through the elevator, and then you have to park a truck in front of the building, and so on and on. People have to drive to these skyscrapers to go there. So the promise that vertical farms has based on food miles is not really true. In fact, if you can go out of the cities where you can find a better agroclimate, you can produce much more efficiently than in rooftops. So I think that vertical farms, or on top of that, a lot of vertical farms, or most vertical farms, require lighting, and so you have to pay for sunlight that you get for free in a glass house. So I don't really think that what we're seeing at the moment is a huge influx of vertical farms. I think that will taper off in the future, and it'll become more of a niche product. But I do think that that in the future, and this is not 2030, but maybe we talk 20 or 30 years, where I believe that power will become much cheaper and much greener. And when that happens, then there is a better future for vertical farms. But for the next 20, 30 years, I definitely see more of a future in glasshouse than in vertical farms.
Yeah, well, in the beginning of 2010, I think people not really, I would not say rejected the idea of a greenhouse, but definitely they've been to the Netherlands or other parts of the world with their greenhouses, and they started their venture with a greenhouse in countries like Malaysia or Thailand, and it pretty much backfired because the climate, microclimate idea, and the greenhouse was practically, in their perception, a magic box that created a very good crop. But let me go to the next question. If you were to compare another region in the world that has similarities with Southeast Asia, with tropical climates, high humidities, what kind of region is comparable here?
It's difficult to say from a climate perspective. The perfect climate for a tomato plant is to have temperatures in summer of no more than 30 degrees Celsius, and temperatures at night of 10 to 15 degrees. And so when you look at Asia, when you're along the coast, you have very high temperatures with very high humidities, but almost always above 30 degrees. And if you want to find climates that have less than 30 degrees in the summer, it's extremely cold in the winter, so you have high fuel cost. And in my current job with Equilibrium, I've been looking at Asia, all of the areas of Asia, into trying to find the perfect climate to grow tomato crops. And there are some locations, but they're far and few between. And so in some terms, I can compare it to Australia. When I moved there in '96, there were always places, all the areas in Australia had temperatures that were too warm in the summer. And I looked very hard and managed to find one location where this didn't happen at altitude with very good winter light. And this is where I built the farm for the Costa Group, which is now a 40-hectare facility. So I with that in mind, I can see that why it's often gone so wrong in Asia, because people would have a block of land and say, okay, what can I do? Let's build a glass house, but not really consider the climate in that decision making, which is, which to me is the first and foremost decision that you have to make, is where is the climate such that I can grow a crop with the least amount of energy use.
But what else do you need to bear in mind, Godfrey, before you venture? And now we're entering another question, because we have seen also in the industry that greenhouses are being built in areas that are practically too hot, no access to energy, and a few years later the greenhouse been shut down. Though it's a high-tech or a venlo type greenhouse, for Southeast Asia, it's quite on a technical level to see that around this area. What other factors should we bear in mind prior to start production in a greenhouse?
For the last 4 years, I've been in mostly Asian countries starting up projects, and when I came into these projects, I was basically handed the key and say, okay, go and do your magic. But then I was looking at what types of technologies were used, and often I saw that money was wasted on technologies that weren't needed, but then money was being saved on technologies that were needed. And it's one of the reasons that inspired me to go and work for Equilibrium, because I felt I needed to be closer to the investors to say, okay, if this is the climate, let's try and find the best climate. But if we can't find the best climate, then these are the things that we can do to mitigate the climate risk with technology. So to really match the technology with the climate. The other very important thing is that in all the projects that I've managed, mostly in Asia, while we were able to successfully grow crops, the marketing was really a struggle. And just because you spend 50 million euros on a glasshouse, the retailers are not begging you to sell your fruit to them. They have existing supply lines, and this was particularly relevant in Dubai, where 90% of the produce is being imported, and everybody felt that replacing import would be easy. But even the retailers had loyalties towards their exporters from other countries, and you had to break up those relationships, and that took time to be able to do that. So having the contact with the retailers is very important, because if you can't sell the fruit, then that everything stops. And so all these things need to be considered before building a glasshouse in order to make it successful in its first year.
We've seen that all across Southeast Asia as well. People venturing into a business without having a market for it. But I've seen, like in countries like India, e-commerce tends to have quite a potential. I don't know whether you've seen the same, like people selling directly through e-commerce or setting up own shop and have direct deliveries.
I fully agree. The supermarkets are not as established as they are in some of the Western countries, and there is an opportunity and maybe a possibility for e-commerce to completely overtake supermarkets into being able to deliver fruit directly, and that would also mean that it'll be easier to build glass houses in locations that are maybe a little bit more remote, but where the climate is more suitable to grow successfully.
Thanks, Godfrey. So one of the biggest challenges that we have seen across the region is, since a couple of years ago, the energy bill has been increasing. People started to do more climate control, running more fans, ventilation, HVAC, you name it. Is that one of the biggest challenges the industry is facing? If so, or if not, what are the other challenges?
You mean in terms of energy use, or?
Yeah, in terms of like the biggest challenge that we face at the moment for expansion in the greenhouse industry.
It's using the right technology in the right climate, and Asia has a wide variety of climates that each needs a different solution. And I think this is one of the big changes, from a few years ago, where, as you said, the glasshouse was just a magical box that you could just put anywhere, and perfect fruit will come out. It's not like that, and it's building a glasshouse now is like building a house. Do you want 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms? You have a choice of what technology you want to put into this glasshouse, but it needs to be perfectly matched to mitigate the risks of the climate.
And when we look to the energy bill, it is quite a big chunk, isn't it?
Yes, and the more you have to mitigate the risk of climate, the higher your electricity cost is. So again, you can reduce electricity costs by going to a location that has a more favorable climate, because you will not use as much of the energy intensive energy. That is one of the biggest things that we've seen, Godfrey. Are there any ways to work with renewable energy or other kinds of energy streams? And this is what we are looking at with Equilibrium, is to find ways of introducing green energy into glass houses. There's a big discussion in the industry. You have field grown tomatoes, you have greenhouse grown tomatoes. Now, which one has a higher CO2 footprint? Which one has is a higher polluting? And of course, when you have to build all the steel and glass, you could argue that has a higher CO2 footprint, because that requires manufacturing to build a glass house. But then in a glass house, you have the opportunity to recirculate all your nutrients, and so there is no leaching of nutrients into the soil. And whereas in a field grown operation, you put fertilizer onto the field, and most of that fertilizer actually leaches into the groundwater table, and nobody's really capable of working that into one number or factor that we as consumers or as builders or as growers can read into what impact does this particular product have on the environment. But it's highly necessary to be able to do that, because a lot of people are confused about is hydroponics or glasshouse more environmentally friendly, is open field more environmentally friendly, is vertical farming more environmentally friendly, and nobody really has the answers to that to those questions. From the inside, I would say that glasshouse grown has the upper hand, but that's easy for me to say, and so I think this is why this is necessary that we qualify those environmental factors, so that we know exactly the how environmentally friendly our products are.
And if you were to compare, right, like the conventional greenhouses, the Venlo greenhouses, plastic greenhouse, when would you choose a semi-closed greenhouse?
So if you look at the Dutch climate, where the typical Venlo glasshouse is so successful, if you look around the world, there are very few locations. There's a bit in New Zealand, there's a bit near Vancouver, and not surprisingly, this is where the glasshouse industry flourished. What the semi-closed glasshouse has done is it has widened the geographical area where produce can be grown successfully in glasshouses. So now, we were very successful at growing tomatoes in Dubai at temperatures of 50 degrees outside, but with 5% humidity outside. So we were able to use evaporative cooling as a means to bring the temperature in the glasshouse to below 30 degrees. And before this, in the Venlo style glasshouse, this was just not possible. So if you look at the geographical area now, it has multiplied by a factor of 20, 30, where we can build glasshouses.
And that's very good to know. So are these areas located in Southeast Asia, and would we be able to tackle the humidity and high temperatures?
For the semi-closed glasshouse, there is you need low humidity, and there are some low humidity areas in Asia, but obviously not as many as in the desert countries. But we've also used a dehumidification technology in Japan, where there's also very high humidity, and so these technologies are available now. The industry has the technology change in the industry last 5 years has been enormous, and I expect in the next 5 years to double that speed of technology change in the industry. So, but the means are available, but the cost of electricity is a barrier to implement these technologies. So they have to be carefully weighed up against each other. And so I keep going back to, if you can find the right agroclimate, and there are locations in Asia where the agroclimate is right, then you are energetically far better off, and your cost of production is much lower if you are able to use a climate where you can use the more simpler Venlo style glasshouse instead of the very high technology glasshouses. But in other, since COVID, there has been a drive to be more autonomous and self-sustainable in production. So countries like Singapore are looking at these new type of technologies to be able to be self-sufficient, or at least 30% self-sufficient by 2030 in providing their own produce. And so that becomes a driver for these technologies to be implemented, because these some of these locations just don't have good agroclimates. And Singapore has a very challenging climate for growing tomatoes in glasshouses.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is one of the biggest topics that we have seen, like where to find a good climate for greenhouses. And high productivity, high yield crops, energy, mostly, not too much that you need to cool down for. Cameron Highlands, highlands in Indonesia. How about lowlands? Because I think now most of the investors and growers, they're crafting or finding ways to grow something on lowlands. What is your take here?
Yes, the technology is there, but the energy costs are also high. So if you can combine, for instance, a power plant, build a glasshouse next to a power plant where you have cheap energy available, then it becomes the cost of production is significantly reduced. You can put lights in the glasshouse. You can do almost anything with technology these days. You can even do vertical farming for that matter, if you have cheap energy. So these are things that we need to look at. And I think one of the challenges, we spent the whole industrial revolution has been geared towards being very good at one thing, producing one thing. And now, we need to broaden our minds again and say, okay, what if we put a power plant next to a glasshouse? How can we make this work? What are the structures of these businesses? And it's quite challenging to have two businesses sometimes have to compromise to actually be more profitable together. And so these are new challenges that we have going forward. But there is the energy industry is changing rapidly. The glasshouse industry is changing rapidly. They both have great futures, and I see them growing side by side for mutually beneficial.
What is like you've done in those 40 years of experience, a lot of projects, or given advice to also maybe even more projects than you have worked in. What was, a referral case with energy that was so successful?
The project in Australia where the climate location was was a very good climate, was a very good example of that. But the project in Dubai or in the Emirates was a groundbreaking project in terms of being able to maintain a climate inside the glasshouse that was required with a very hostile climate outside, and so that was to me was a very satisfying project to be able to take something where before the whole industry revolved around like 3 months of production in the wintertime when the climate was favorable, but nobody was really growing crops, having glasshouses planted 12 months of the year. And because these glasshouses are expensive, you really need to have them planted. You can't afford to have them 3 months empty. And so, being able to get the right climate in the glasshouse, get the right quality, that was very satisfying to see this new technology being successful.
That's a very good advice. And if you were to look at yield, for example, I think that's one of the very important questions that comes around nowadays. What crop should I select, and what yields can I expect? And even if I were to have a semi-closed greenhouse, what are the levels you could predict, or is there anything like such? Or
well, yield. You're right. Yield is very important, and so we, in the glasshouse industry, we look at everything per kilo and per square meter. So if you can produce 20% more, but you use 10% more energy, then your kilowatts of energy per kilo of tomatoes is actually reduced. So this is how we look at the use of energy. For years and years, people outside of Holland have not been able to duplicate the yields There were many glasshouse builders who said, okay, we do 80 kilos in the Netherlands. If we build you a glasshouse there, you actually have more light than in the Netherlands, so you should be able to do 90 kilos or 100 kilos per square meter. And that never happened because of other climate factors. Once we're able to get the perfect climate inside the glasshouse, there is no reason that we can achieve the same yields as in the Netherlands. And there are companies now in the United States, in Australia, that are achieving those yields. And there is no reason why we could not do the same in Asia, provided we build in the right locations and we build the right type of glass houses.
What yields are we looking at?
In tomatoes, 80 to 90 kilos per square meter are possible. If you look at peppers, 30 kilos per square meter. Cucumbers, 120 kilos per square meter. And a lot of what we've been talking about is, particularly with climate, is tomatoes. But I also have to note that crops like peppers and cucumbers have a higher threshold in temperature. So perhaps these are crops that are more suitable to grow in Asia than tomatoes.
Okay, and would those crops be like the high yield crops, or the crops that you would recommend in terms of semi-closed greenhouses?
Well, the cherry tomatoes are more resilient against higher temperatures. So if you're in a warmer temperature, then I would definitely recommend them. Obviously, the yields are lower. They're less than half of the large truss of the beefsteak tomatoes, but they also seem to have a stronger following with the consumer because they taste much better. But the key is that before you build a glass house, that you talk to the retailers and say where is the gap in the market? Where can we step in? Where can we assist you to have a better product on your shelves, and come to an agreement with your customer of what product you are going to grow.
Very, very well. Thank you, Godfrey. I just want to take, we are going quite fast at the time, and your answers and insights are very useful. If we were to look at this book, it's a few questions. And one important question is like, what inspired you to have such a tool to extend and multiply? What inspired you to?
I am Van der Hoeven was organizing. Van der Hoeven, who built these modular glass houses, they recognized that the growers were going through an adjustment period. That even though you had experience in a Venlo glass house, the semi-closed glass house was a much different animal. And so they organized these meetings where growers from around the world were getting together, and we had huge discussions. And I saw that a lot of growers were struggling with this converting from a Venlo to a semi-closed glass house. So I decided to write down my experiences, and that culminated into a book. At the same time, I also saw that a lot of investors felt that the glasshouse was this magic box and that they could put it anywhere, and there was a lot of different reactions from investors. Some people were saying, well, if I build a cheap plastic glasshouse for half the money than a high-tech glasshouse, then I can build twice the area and then I make more money. And well, that doesn't really work that way, because if you save money on technology, then the quality is also not going to come out in the right way. And so I felt that there was a lot of money being wasted into glass houses, and I wanted to help direct investors into the right direction, to say, if you're going to do this, it's not as simple as just building a glass house. You really need to think about where you're going to build it, what technology you're going to use, where are your markets, what is your product, and how are you going to be able to sell, if you're a new company into a new country, how are you going to sell this produce?
Interesting view, Godfrey. What there's a lot of things in this book. Like, what other key takes are there for the readers? And yeah, how would you summarize it?
Well, I was raised, or I was educated as a chemist, and I can tell you that when I got called out in the middle of the night because the boiler was failing and it was -20 outside, and and I was fixing the boiler in the middle of the night while at the same time raising 3 children, I often thought, maybe I should have stayed in chemistry. But I also realized that that there are a lot of other people, a lot of our other growers out there who are doing exactly the same thing, and that inspired me. That people that are so dedicated to their business and to their income and to their crops, and so I felt that this was my contribution to at least making the life of semi-closed growers a little bit easier by providing them some more information. But there are many other things in there. There's a really big chapter on labor management, and I think that my 40 years of experience, I started managing people at the age of 22, and I was managing people that are twice my age, and I was probably way too friendly and not tough enough on some of the people that I managed, because I just didn't know how to do this. But 40 years later, I've been through everything, and one of my readers commented on the book and said, he said, wow, I just felt like I had a 40-year crash course in labor management, and and I think that labor management is a integral part of glasshouse business. It's the glasshouse. Building a glasshouse investment creates the most jobs per investment dollar, and it's a difficult thing, and many growers are hoping for robots to come and take over, because labor management is a very difficult thing. But I think I think I've got some very good tips and tools for growers to help them manage labor.
Very interesting, Godfrey. I think there's a few people that I know in the little experience that I have compared with you, but that have this extensive experiences in growing across the world. I saw a very interesting question, and I think this one is touching base on the energy cost for near cities. You would have food supply close by, or a microclimate favorable area to have less energy consumption. What is here the best solution, and how should we approach this case?
Well, the book actually describes a case where we take an example of a glasshouse in a city with a slightly less favorable climate, and then looks at building a glasshouse hundreds of kilometers away with a better climate, and then compares those energy inputs into the glasshouse, and it comes out favorable to be further away in the right climate as compared to being in the city. So I don't buy into the fact that building in the cities is a better way to do things. Some cities have good climates. Amsterdam has just as good a climate as the Westland in Holland, but the price of land is very expensive, and so there are lots of other factors to take into consideration. But in general, this has been one of my main, the key things that I've learned in the industry is that if you can't provide the right climate to the plants, they're not going to deliver you the yields that you think you might can.
Okay, good point. So this case is as following, and this is also another interesting incoming question. If you were to choose, in terms of yields, and you would have an energy facility supplying energy, so energy would not be a big of a factor, and you were to choose a conventional greenhouse versus a semi-closed greenhouse, What is the biggest difference in yield, would you predict?
It depends on the outside conditions, of course, but if I take Japan as an example, if we didn't have cooling in this glasshouse, so just to explain, this glasshouse was a semi-closed glasshouse, but then on top of that, we were able to do night cooling, where sometimes the minimum temperature was 30 degrees outside, and the glasshouse was able to bring the temperature down to below 20 degrees. We would have, if we didn't have that technology available, we would produce 30% less. And not only would we produce 30% less, but the quality of the fruit would be so much worse. So there's a saying in the produce is that you're only as good as your last delivery, and you may have a very good rapport with the supermarket. You've been supplying good quality all spring, winter and spring, no rejections, and then you get to summer and all of a sudden, the quality is not there. The supermarket loses confidence, or the customer loses confidence in your ability to deliver fruit, and when you have that lack of confidence, then that colors the relationship, and so the customer is going to know that every summer you're going to be in trouble, and if there is another alternative, they will go there. At the same time, because we in the industry we look at the retailer as the customer, but because they buy our fruit, but the consumer also, if they are disappointed with the product, then they won't come back for a number of weeks to buy the same product again. So quality is, if you grow produce in a glasshouse, quality is essential. You need to have that to maintain your relationship with the retailer or with your customer, in order to be able to sell the fruit year round and sell all of your fruit every day of the week.
Very interesting development. It's obviously much more than just building a greenhouse. And you would need a business plan to have in place before you actually get started, and have the ideal climate, and asking the right questions. And if you were to see the energy in 20 years, like you predicted, was more accessible than today, and energy would be available, and not so much as a cost factor for greenhouses, but productivity. Would you believe that it's still within, in cities, growing in cities would be more feasible instead of long distances? Or would you still think the areas will be decentralized remotely? Or what is your take here?
It's a interesting, and I thought about it, and what I realized is that if we were to grow all of our produce in the city, our cities would be 20 times bigger than what they are today. And so just try and imagine, Beijing being 20 times bigger than what it is today, in order to fit in all the glass houses and all the dairy farms and everything else. So it's just not conceivable that this is going to happen. Yes, there will be small areas, and in the Netherlands, through our very strict planning, we've been able to have farmland right next to the cities, but that farmland is 10 times cheaper than I remember driving through out of Amsterdam, and I was driving with a fellow Dutchman, and I said, how is it possible that they have cows here just 10 kilometers out of Amsterdam? How can they afford to have cows there? And he explained to me that the land price was so much cheaper in those areas. Now, if we go to Shanghai, and all of a sudden the some areas in the city have to have much cheaper land prices because farming is there, it's a skewed way of doing business, and so I don't really see a future of farming in cities. There will be some niche farms for sure, but I think that most consumers have a very different idea of farming. Farming today is industrialized. It's large scale. It has grown that way because we have to produce a lot of food out of little land. And this is a challenge in going into 2050, which is a little bit further in the future. But we have to feed 9.7 billion people. And in order to do that with today's technology, we would need to use up all the forests and jungles that are present on the earth today and convert it to farmland in order to feed all people on earth. So we have to get smarter with the way we do business. And, for instance, if we were to convert all cucumbers, all tomatoes, all eggplant and peppers to glasshouse, we would save an area the size of Texas in land because we use 10 times less area to produce the same amount. So that's a significant step towards securing food safety in the future. But there's no doubt in my mind that seed companies and farming practices have a large role to play in this as well.
Thank you, Godfrey. We're a little bit I think more and more questions are coming in because this is such an interesting topic. If you wouldn't mind, we have a few more before we conclude this interview. Let's talk briefly about energy. I think I don't know whether this is a topic you're comfortable in speaking, but many people are exploring energy. What would you predict is the next stage? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it biogas? What is it, or is it all different?
Again, predicting the future is difficult, but solar panels have become more and more efficient. I'm talking to some companies that want to integrate solar into glass in a glass house, even into screens, shade screens in the glass house. I think that nuclear fusion, which doesn't have the nasty byproducts that nuclear energy has. But that's a technology that is still, being researched. But those are energy sources of the future. I remember as a 21-year-old, I was backpacking in New Zealand, and my parents forced me to call me every 2 weeks, and I would go to a phone box with a fistful of 20-cent coins, and I would be talking for 1 minute. Hello, how's the weather, and regards to dad, and by the end of 1 minute I had thrown like 10 coins into this machine. And now we are talking today with what is it, more than 60 people, and we're not really paying anything for it, and it's international, and I think that energy will go the same way. There is no doubt in my mind, but when this will happen, whether this will be 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years, I cannot say. But when it does happen, it will change the world. It will change farming for sure, and in the glasshouse industry, and things will become much simpler. And you will not need people like me anymore that can grow the crops. Then it just becomes a program where you say, day one you need so much light and so much water and fertilizer, and day two you do this, and robots will be harvesting the tomatoes. But it'll be I don't think I have to work. I don't think I have to worry about job security for the rest of my career.
Moore's law says technology will be more accessible, more available, and we'll might be able to scale faster in the future. Though we cannot see it today, it can change next week or the other week. If you look to the cost structure of a greenhouse or produce, the cost structure, then you would have 1/3 would be energy, roughly, or a substantial part of it, and labor. How would you?
To be honest, energy is and of course it depends on where you are. Energy is probably about 15%. But if we look at the Netherlands at the moment, where the cost of natural gas is €1 per cubic meter, prices that have never been seen before, obviously that is causing many growers to rethink what are we going to do. But I do think this is a temporary thing, more to do with politics than with the price of gas. And if you go to a country like let's say the United Arab Emirates, where labor is very cheap, then the energy cost, relatively speaking, is far greater. But labor can be upwards of 30 to 50%. So in terms of cost, energy is not that expensive as compared to some of the labor cost. Also, glasshouse cost is quite considerable. So the energy cost is not as much as what you would think it would be, but we do have to be careful. And when we talk about using lights, using cooling, it can become quite intensive.
Very good point. I think we're 6 minutes overdue. I think maybe there's one more question if they're coming in right now as we speak. Anything you care to share for investors or growers to do today in terms of to be ready in 10 years or longer and be competitive with, except energy, of course, with the profitable crop?
I think that the future is in higher capex and lower opex. So if you can buy a power plant, for instance, in Greece at the moment, Greece is trying to eliminate coal-fired power plants and are subsidizing gas-fired power plants. And what you see is that they are combining with glass houses in order to make this happen. I think this is the type of thing that's going to happen in the future. Like if you are a Dutch grower right now and you were getting your heat from a power plant, you would be laughing right now. And I think that this is what we're going to see more of in the future, where energy production and food production will go hand in hand, side by side. And then the choice of location becomes less important, because if you have cheap energy, like I said, you can do almost anything.
Including lowland.
Including lowland, yes. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Godfrey. And I think we are 6 minutes overdue. As I was, and hopefully the audience also will be, I'm holding here the book. It's been, here, written by Godfrey Dol in cooperation with Van der Hoeven. It has many great insights. I was inspired because it enables much more than currently on the market. We have maybe a few final words for you, Godfrey, before we conclude. And I have one small announcement that we make for the next GreenTech Masters, where we have new guests presented by the community in Southeast Asia. Godfrey, any final words?
No, thank you for inviting me to this talk. I hope that the listeners learned something, and very much appreciate being able to share my viewpoints with the audience.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. Fun in this session. We were not able to answer all questions. I hope you were inspired as we were. The industry is changing fast. Lowlands is possible. Energy is a very important factor, but also labor and other factors you will find back in the book. With that said, I would like to thank all the audience. I think we have pretty much a lot of dedicated people from the industry. I would like to welcome you as well for March 14, where we have also a new GreenTech Master session with a new guest speaker that would inspire you for thinking maybe differently or adapting technology in different countries. On behalf of the Dutch business community in Southeast Asia, herewith we conclude the session, and thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Godfrey, and I hope to see you soon in Singapore.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Hans, for inviting me.
Well, thank you indeed on behalf of the NCCC, the organizing chamber, and all our colleagues in the region. Thank you for joining. And Manuel, also you, thank you for asking the right questions, and Godfrey, to you to answer them. I believe there are many more questions which might come our way by email. We try to address that as much as we can. No worries at all, but very happy to see next month we have another GreenTech Masters series already lined up, and this is going to be in the coming months. So thank you all for joining us, and greetings from Bangkok, and we wish you good luck in your endeavors in whatever way you're going to grow your crops for the future. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Bye-bye.